Good morning, Dave. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can, Stan. Yeah, doing well.
Okay, excellent. We're just a few minutes before the meeting, and we'll do a roll call starting off. So everybody just stand by. We do not have a lot of people physically present in the room here, just a few, but we'll get them to sit down and we'll get started in a minute or two.
Okay, I'll have to leave a little early today. Actually, in about 45 minutes, there was something else that got scheduled on top of this, but that won't happen again.
Okay, it happens.
Yeah.
So if I could ask everybody to kind of get ready to get started here in the room. Okay, very good. Thank you. Hello, Don. Good. And is Yolanda coming this morning?
Yes, she will be right on time.
She'll be right on. Okay, we'll stand by for her to sit down. Thank you. I heard that she was coming in this morning, so I just didn't want to fail to wait for her.
She should be here.
Okay. Oh dear. All right, everybody, good morning. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And this is our July 14, 2021 PPACG meeting, starting at 9:04. And if we could, Andy, if we could start with a roll call to see what board members we have present.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to mention first who is in person here in the room. Chair Stan Vanderwerf, Council Member and Vice Chair Sharon Thompson, Mayor Don Wilson are the three board members we have in person. And on the Zoom, I see Council Member Dave Donaldson, City of Colorado Springs, Mayor John Graham, Manitou Springs, Commissioner Cami Bremer, Castle County, Commissioner Dick Elsner, Park County. And I think that's it as far as voting board members, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, very
I'm
good.
sorry, Councilmember Yolanda Avila just joined us in person.
Good morning, Yolanda. Okay, very good. So we have a quorum and that is now established. Do we have any introductions that we need to do?
can I make a brief introduction, Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Just want to
please.
mention and introduce, come on up to the podium, our new Military Planning Program Manager, Paul Rochette. And he may be a familiar face to a lot of you in the region. Really super happy to have Paul on board to lead our military planning, our JLUS program. Took Brian Potts's spot, you'll recall Brian, but wealth of experience in economics and planning, and just really happy to have Paul on board. So welcome, Paul.
Good morning, Paul.
Thank all of you. I'm really pleased to be here at PPACG. This is this position just seems to fit with what I enjoy and what I do, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the one thing that is interesting, I got my professional start at PPACG many years ago, so it's kind of like a homecoming. So anyway, but the last 16, 17 years, I've been part of Summit Economics and with Dave Bamberger and Tucker Hart Adams and Tom Binnings. And so we've done a lot of work in the region. So I'm familiar with a lot of the issues that we'll be facing. But anyway, I look forward to working with all of you, and my phone is always on. So call me whenever you'd like.
Well, great. Well, I was going to say welcome aboard, but actually it sounds like I need to say welcome back.
Paul,
Are there any questions for Paul?
Yeah, Paul, what did you do the first time you were at PPACG?
Well, it was interesting. It was my first professional job. I'd come back from the Peace Corps and I needed something to do. And I met this guy named Dave Bamberger, which may be familiar to some of you. And he hired me under the old CETA program, and I assisted him with the economics program and the housing analysis. I forget what that was called officially, but basically, when I did a little bit of GIS back in the very early GIS days. So.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions for Paul? I can switch to.
And that's how it was when we were on.
Yeah, maybe that helps. Does that help at all? Yeah.
Maybe when we turn the other one off, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
that might help.
Okay, let's give that a try. Is that better? No. So stand by just a moment for everybody on the board. Do you want me to move left or right and give it a try?
That would work. Let's try that.
Okay. Thought this was fixed, but.
This is Dick Elsner. You sounded great as far as I was concerned.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I'll stay here and let's hope it isn't too much trouble for anybody.
Yeah, Stan, this is Dave Donaldson. Your voice is perfect on my computer also.
Yeah, apparently it works really well online, and maybe it's getting a little feedback here in the room.
Yeah, we'll adjust the volume in the room to get the right balance, but
Okay,
thank you for your patience.
I can maybe reduce the volume a little bit, see if that helps. All right, let's then we have the agenda at this point. I don't think we have any other introductions. Let's go ahead and proceed with the agenda, and we need to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thompson?
Okay, there is a motion and a second, and it's Sharon Thompson. You made the motion, and who made the second?
I did, Don Wilson.
Thank you very much. And are there any comments or questions on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed with a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Let's move on to item number 3, public comments. And Jessica, did we have any public comments emailed in? No, okay. And then we have the SB 260 transportation funding. Is Mr. Sudmeyer here?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us. I think John Leosadis is going to say a few words and then turn it over to Mr. Sudemeyer.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And while Jeff gets his stuff ready and Jess gets his presentation up, Andy had said, hey, we want to make sure that we have a nice presentation on all of the different things that happened with SB 260, at least from the funding side. And he's, and a lot of you here on the board have been very conscious of how long the meetings have been taking. So he said, can you get it done in like, 10, 15 minutes? And I said, yeah, no way. just too much stuff. So what we landed on is that on August 2nd and 16th, we will have 2 workshops, an hour and a half each, covering a variety of topics where we can really get down into the details. So what we're intending to do with Jeff's time today is have him give about a 10-minute overview of the different financial aspects and funding opportunities associated with 260, and have him cover that at the 50,000 foot level. And then when he comes back for the workshops, we'll have the half an hour to get into more depth. This is by no means to say that you as the board can't ask any questions you want to ask or go far afield on some of the different topics. But that being said, if you do that, just know that I'm not responsible for the meeting taking 3 hours. So that's our attempt to streamline all of this, have Jeff chat with you for a little bit, but again, bring the items back for those workshops. So with that, Jeff, appreciate you taking the time to do this. I took a little peek at your presentation and it looks great. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions on how the money can be tapped that's there and used at the different jurisdictions. So with that, Jeff, thanks.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to present. And as John mentioned, there is a lot in this bill, and I will focus very narrowly on just kind of the financial aspects. I'm not going to get into say some of the planning and environmental requirements. We'll save that for another day. But I will try to give you a pretty quick overview of what the bill means from a funding perspective. And as John mentioned, at when we're concluded, I'll be happy to stay on and take comments or questions as long as you'd like, but also feel free to stop me as I go. So, John, if you do you have the slides up? Oh.
They're coming up as we speak.
Okay. I'll just hold tight a minute while we get that first slide up. Okay. And if you could go ahead to the second slide, that's where I'll start off this morning. Okay, so a lot of information on this slide, just starting kind of the 50,000 foot view, just so you know, I'll kind of give you an overview of the overall package, and then I'll briefly kind of hit on each of the buckets, so to speak, that funds flow to. So the bill itself is about a $5.4 billion package over an 11-year period. That's through fiscal year 32. It's composed of about $3.8 billion in new fee revenue and about $1.6 billion in general fund and stimulus dollars. The bill does not sunset at the end of 11 years. We from a forecasting perspective, it's just looked out at the revenue picture over the 10 years of fee revenue, which is fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 32. Add the current fiscal year, that's 11 years. So the fees phase in over a 10-year period, but again, don't sunset in fiscal year 32. The bill allocates funds to the Highway User Tax Fund at the existing proportions of 60% CDOT, 40% cities and counties. It allocates funds to 3 electrification enterprises, a new non-attainment area enterprise, and a bridge and tunnel enterprise. Those are all new enterprises created by the bill, with the exception of the bridge and tunnel enterprise, which simply modifies the existing bridge enterprise at CDOT to include tunnels and to provide an additional funding stream over the next several years. The bill also allocates funds to a couple of programs, the Revitalizing Main Streets program and the Multimodal and Mitigation Options Fund program. Both of those programs flow through CDOT, but ultimately The majority of those funds are contracted out by CDOT to local recipients. Let's go ahead to the next slide.
There is, if I might, this is Commissioner Stan, you have a statement on there, $500,000 for Burnham Yard. Does anybody know what that is? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I can address that. Burnham Yard is the old Union Pacific Rail Yard in central Denver that was recently acquired through the High Performance Transportation Enterprise, essentially retaining that large parcel of land for future transportation purposes. And the bill actually set aside about $500,000 in funding for some upfront costs associated with that acquisition.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, and let's go ahead to the next slide, and I will briefly run through what makes up the fees. Again, I'll do this very briefly. The fee revenue is composed of a number of new fees. The road usage fee and bridge and tunnel enterprise fee are essentially a per gallon fee assessed on top of the existing gas tax. The EV equalization fee is an increase to the existing registration fee that is intended to have the effect of essentially the EV registration once fully phased in would be roughly equivalent to what someone would pay today in gas tax if they were driving an internal combustion engine. Equivalent at the state level, I should say, not state and federal. The bill put in place fees on TNCs, that's transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, and it put in place an online delivery fee that would apply to deliveries for goods or services purchased online. So that could include your Amazon delivery, or it could include delivery by DoorDash, for example, or Uber Eats. The bill also modified some of the existing faster car rental fees, which had the effect of essentially just expanding when and where those existing car rental fees applied. Let's go on to the next slide. So this gives you a picture of revenue over the 11-year period, broken down by recipient. Again, about 5.4 billion through fiscal year 32. You'll note, obviously, that the bill is front-loaded with a significant infusion of stimulus funds on the front end. And then you'll also notice that the fee revenue phases in over time. Each of the fees follows essentially a stair-step model. I should say most of the fees, that's not true of all, but many of the fees escalate over the course of the next 10 years and don't reach their full rate until fiscal year 32. So you'll see the revenue kind of start out slow and then grow over the 10-year period. Let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to briefly kind of run through each of these sources. This is the state highway fund revenue, about 2.4 billion of the total through fiscal year 32. You'll note here that the state highway fund revenue has a couple of different purposes. One of the key purposes is that more than half of that revenue, about 1.5 billion, is really revenues that is intended to repay the Senate Bill 267 COPs. So that's the gray bar. You'll see a lot of that revenue was intended to essentially provide us with a sustainable way to pay back these COPs and to be able to move forward with the full 4 years of Senate Bill 267 COPs that were originally authorized. The repayment of that had been a little bit of a unresolved issue that this bill intended to address. Let's go on to the next slide.
Jeff, if you might, just another quick question. So
Sure.
I understand the going back one chart, the dark blue, which is debt service, but then the remainder is a gray color and it says flexible. What is meant by that?
Sure. Flexible just simply means that it does not sort of have an existing pledge against it. Now, I will say that the big focus in the bill itself is on the CDOT 10-year plan. So I think the flexible just simply means that it's not encumbered, say, by debt service, and could be flexibly programmed by the commission. But I think the assumption is that the majority of the funds beyond debt service will ultimately go to funding projects in the CDOT 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So bridge and tunnel, again, this is just provides an additional revenue source to the existing bridge enterprise, about 523 million through fiscal year 32. Let's go on to the next slide. Non-attainment, the bill established a new non-attainment enterprise at CDOT that would focus on air quality mitigation elements of projects in the Front Range non-attainment area, about 184 million anticipated to that enterprise over the course of the next 10 years. Next slide, please. The bill also established 3 new enterprises focused on electrification. One enterprise at CDOT, that's the Clean Transit Enterprise, one at CDPHE, and one at the Colorado Energy Office. Collectively, those 3 enterprises are anticipated to receive about 734 million through fiscal year 32. Let's go on to the next slide. The multimodal mitigation options funding, that totals about 463 million through fiscal year 32. This was an existing program I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It was established in Senate Bill 1801, but it was originally just anticipated to be a short 2-year program. It only had funding for 2 years. The bill obviously makes that a permanent program, putting in place a large amount of upfront funding over the next few years, and then an ongoing kind of more stable level of funding from there. These funds are statutorily split 85% to locals and 15% to CDOT. So while all the dollars flow through CDOT, most of these dollars will ultimately go out to awards to local projects. Next slide, please. Similarly, the Revitalizing Main Streets program is a program that CDOT established about 1.5 years ago. It was anticipated, at least initially, as a short-term program. This bill makes that program essentially an ongoing permanent program, provides a significant amount of upfront funding, again, largely driven by stimulus spending, and then provides a sustainable, albeit smaller amount of funding so that program can continue in perpetuity. Those funds flow through CDOT or administered by CDOT, but again, ultimately, most of the dollars through the Revitalizing Main Streets program are awarded to local entities. Next slide, please. And then we get to the local, the local share. The local HUTF revenue, of course, like your existing HUTF revenue, does not flow through CDOT. It flows directly to cities and counties. I will note that CDOT actually doesn't calculate your HUTF revenue. That is the responsibility of the Treasurer's Office. We did, however, in this case, look at the forecast for local HUTF revenue and attempt to estimate how we think that might flow down to individual cities and counties. Again, because this is backed by fee revenue, it starts out at a much lower level and then climbs to about almost 160 million a year by fiscal year 32. Let's go to the next slide. Obviously, won't go through this in detail. I think many of you have probably seen these numbers already. I know we had sent out a big spreadsheet with local HUTF distribution, or at least our estimate of that distribution. And I believe that was shared with many of our planning partners. But if you haven't seen that, we've got that information here in this deck, so you can see kind of order of magnitude what this might mean for your local government. Next slide, and I think on this next slide is probably where I'll conclude, and then be happy to take any additional questions. So again, just to kind of circle back a little bit on the local funding opportunities provided by the bill. Obviously, there's the dedicated local HUTF revenue that I mentioned previously, just shy of $1 billion over the course of the next 11 years. But in addition to that, there's a lot of funds that ultimately, I think, indirectly will flow through to locals. First of all, the Multimodal Options Fund, as I mentioned, in this case, it's a statutory requirement that 85% of those funds be directed by the MPOs and TPRs. So again, while those dollars will flow through CDOT, ultimately, 85% of those dollars will be selected by MPOs and TPRs and directed to local projects. About 15% is retained by CDOT for statewide projects. Similarly, Revitalizing Main Streets program that has been since its inception a competitive grant-based program where awards are made to local entities. So we'll see about 115 million over the next decade flowing through that program, ultimately primarily to local governments. And then finally, the enterprises. Ultimately, the 3 electrification enterprises, the exact structure of those programs will be established by the new enterprise boards, which have not been formed yet. So this is a little bit of speculation. I don't want to get too far ahead of the enterprise boards, but I think it's anticipated that much of the dollars administered by those 3 enterprises would follow existing program models that are already out there in the electrification space that would have a significant component of funds awarded ultimately to locals through a grant-based application process. So I'll stop there. I know that was a lot of information. That at a high level is essentially the 5.4 billion and how it breaks out by program and over time. Again, as John mentioned, be back in early August to talk in much more detail. And at that point, I think we'll also talk about some of the other elements of the bill, some of the provisions related to planning and environment and accountability and transparency, et cetera. But I wanted to give you this overview, and I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Great. Are there any questions for Jeff? And I have a couple, but I'll reserve those in case anybody else has them first. Okay, hearing none. The first one, Jeff, I just wanted to identify for you, and I don't know if this program, it's called Power Pathways. That's about high voltage electrification projects. And there's a proposal for high voltage power electrification towers going through El Paso County. You may know about this, Jeff, but there is concern from Schriever Air Force Base and the Air Force Academy about where those electrification towers would be located. Schriever Air Force Base, being the largest satellite command and control facility in the world, its mission can be negatively affected by having high voltage power lines near it. So they're going to engage on that and make sure that wherever it ends up getting placed, that it doesn't impact some of our military bases in El Paso County. And Jeff, I wanted you to just be aware of that.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I am not familiar with that, but I took some notes, and I will certainly share that with some of the folks here at CDOT that are focused more specifically on the electrification programs.
Thank you. I'd appreciate remaining cognizant of that and making sure we don't inadvertently impact something else that we're doing in El Paso. That's the title of it is Power Pathways, and it's a presentation we've seen from Xcel Energy.
Okay.
And then the other quick question I have, but this should be obvious and easy, is I'd be interested in a copy of the charts.
Oh, a copy of the charts?
Yep.
Certainly.
So
Yes,
that
well,
was the one
yeah.
last thing.
We have Jeff's slides, so appreciate that, Jeff, and we'll get those around to everybody this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Jeff at this point then? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You bet. Happy to join you. Thanks for having me.
Very good. And you had mentioned to me, Andy, on adding an item under public comment that perhaps Jill Gabler may have an interest in speaking on Front Range Rail. Is she available?
I don't know if she is online or not. Jill, did you want to speak? I don't see her on the Zoom.
Okay. So it does not appear that she is with us at this point in time. If she joins us later, we can give her a few minutes. Let's move on then to item number 4, consent items. There are 3 items: approval of the minutes, summary of the financials, and membership appointments. Are there any questions or concerns about any of these items? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
And that was done by Mr. Wilson. Is there a second?
I'll second John Graham Manitou.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. That is moved and seconded. Any one last chance for comments or questions on any of these consent items? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, all of those are approved. Let's move on to the action items 5A, which is the fiscal year 2022 to 2025 draft transportation improvement program. And I think we have public comments and public hearing. Please.
Good morning, Catherine Wenger, Senior Transportation Planner, PPACG. The staff recommends that we open a public hearing to hear public comments for the fiscal year 22 through 2025 tip update. And I think I leave that to you, Chair, to open that public hearing.
All right, are you just to make sure I have a clarity here, are you asking to hold for approval to hold a future public comment period, or are you talking about now?
It will be during this meeting, we'll be opening the public hearing and comment period for any public input. And then once that's closed, we'll talk about the just the information items. So you won't be taking action on this item this month. It will just be doing action for the public hearing.
Okay, and go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Do we have a presentation for the public to comment on to open? So would we open the public hearing portion after the presentation, or would we open it before? I would think we would do it after, so that if there is comment,
Yep.
particularly pertaining to the presentation.
Okay. We did this, I think, last year or 2 years ago. We opened the public hearing first, but I'm happy to discuss first and then open the public hearing. I don't really know that. I don't know if you have a status quo on this, John.
Yeah, sorry, it doesn't matter, we can do it that way. I think what we've done is that it's gone out to the public as a 30-day public comment period. So the materials have already been out there, and this is the designated time and place for them to come and
Okay.
do that. It's flying under the radar, so I kind of doubt we're going to get that many comments, if any. So, but we can go ahead and do the presentation first and then that.
And is it fair to say that this is the last step in the public outreach portions? We've had open houses, virtual open houses to let the public come and review what's in the draft tip and make comments and so forth. So
Yes.
this is kind of their last chance to provide official comments.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
No, I appreciate that. And maybe also for clarification on my point, 30-day public comment period. So we can go ahead and with the presentation, that's fine, whatever order works for me. But I want to be specific on understanding the public comment period. If we open it today on the 14th of July, it would go then to 13 August.
I think we've already completed it.
Yeah, we
Oh.
actually held a previous 30-day public comment period. And we received some comments that I discussed in the memo. And this is just the final piece of the public hearing, just in case there are any additional comments during this during the board meeting that we would like.
Okay, thank you. So go ahead and proceed with the presentation, and then we'll just see if we have any public comments at that point.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. So over the past 4-6 months, I believe, I can't remember exactly, we have brought you this fiscal year 22 through 25 tip update draft documents. The tip is our transportation improvement program, or our short range plan, that outlines all federal and state funds with some local match that are being allocated or programmed within our region. And that's within the MPO region, not the full PPACG region, which is the MPO is our Metropolitan Planning Organization, and that's for transportation planning efforts in this area. So this is for the fiscal year 22 through 25. Our current tip is 21 through 24. And so we're doing an update based on new projects that are being added to this plan. As outlined in the memo, due to the PPACG Transportation Improvement Program, our TIP being out of alignment with the CDOT's, the statewide version, or the STIP, we are adopting 2 TIPs back to back. This one is the first one that you'll be seeing for the 22 through 25 update for planned adoption in August or next month. And then you'll also be seeing soon more documents coming through for a fiscal year 23 through 27 with a planned adoption in 22 to fix the issue of being out of alignment. And I discussed that a little bit further down as well. So we have developed this 22 through 25 update draft for committee and public review. As we mentioned, the committees that had a chance to review the document prior to release to the public And then the board did release that to the public back in May. And so we did have that 30-day public comment period, and we held 2 virtual open houses. And we did receive a couple of people visiting our virtual houses, but they didn't make any formal comments. They just wanted to see what the tip was about. And then we did receive some official comments on the document outlined in attachment 2. And I'll discuss that briefly or summarize that. So the 2 forms that were submitted online through our website for public comments were, there were some editing errors and questions on how to access our appendices. So we updated those errors in the document and let them know how to access those things. And then there was also requesting of mapping our projects. And we led them to our online tip database, which actually has an interactive map format that shows the projects in a map format. So we just made sure it was more clear how to access those different documents for this tip and for other tips as well. So we made those updates and brought them to you last month. We haven't made much changes since the last document that you saw last month. Besides, there was a table that someone requested that we do the header on each of the pages instead of just on the first page for clarification. So we did update that. And so the tip is attached to your packet, attachment 1, but you can also find the full document online in the electronic version, as I mentioned, for that draft. And so this month, like we mentioned, is for public hearing and for information item for you to review the document one last time. And then we'll bring it to you next month for a final adoption. And then it would go into effect after we send that off to our CDOT and federal highway partners.
Okay, very good. I just asked the board if they have any questions, but one task that we have, first of all, Commissioner Stone has joined us. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then we will need to, I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, we need a vote to open the meeting for public hearing. And then we have a discussion as a board on those public hearings, although there doesn't seem like there's much to discuss on it. But
I think that's correct. Open the public hearing, accept public comments, close the public hearing, and then you can discuss what you've heard, if anything, and then give us direction if needed. Then we'll be back next month for adoption.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So at this time, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to open the public hearing so that we can, I mean, we've had them described to us already, but we can have a further conversation on those at that point, or see if there's anybody else that has additional comments. So I'll entertain a motion to open for a public hearing.
Yes, Dan, this is Dave Donaldson. I make a motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Stone gave the second. All right, so we are now open for a public comment. Is there anybody online, or has anybody submitted any additional comments other than what is listed in the package? Okay, so hearing none, the procedure here is to close the public comments, and then the board can have a discussion about the comments that have been provided so far. So I'll entertain a motion to close public comment.
Stan, this is Dave again. I'll make a motion to close the public comment period.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. So let's go ahead. Actually, I didn't take the vote the first time, but I don't know if it makes a difference. Yes, please go ahead. So do you have all that have made the motion and made the second? Okay, very good. All right, let's go ahead and proceed with the vote. This is maybe a little bit out of turn, but let's just make it formal. This will be a vote for opening, and then we'll do a vote for closure. So all those in favor of opening for public comment, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and now let's go ahead and proceed with the vote to close, because we have no further comments. All those in favor to close, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? And there are none opposed. Okay, so we have opened and closed for public comment in case there were any additional comments that were available here. And we have the 2 online form submissions that you mentioned, the editing errors and how to access the appendices, and then the requesting of the map projects. You've explained how both of those have been addressed. So does the board have any questions about those comments? Or maybe any other comments that were made from the two attendees that were at the virtual open houses? It was not a lot of public participation. Are there any questions from the board on these items? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to add one comment regarding the comments we received back for this. We did reply to or to the two people that did submit forms. And one of them we had a very detailed kind of reply from Colorado Springs. And that person was very thankful that they received such a personalized message back. And they said that it really helped to instill public confidence in our public process. So I thought that was a really great comment that we received and thought I'd share that with you. So thank you.
Was that comment number 2?
Let me check. Yes.
Okay.
Talking about the projects in the plan that,
Okay, and you do have in the notes here also a submission letter from CDOT Region 2 requesting project updates to surface treatment.
yes, I'm sorry. That was an update to the project listing. No new projects were added. It was just an update to the years and the funds that adjusting between years so that they were more accurate to what they recently adopted in their statewide version.
Okay, so we have in fact also made those changes then.
Yes, we made
Okay,
those
very
changes
good.
as well. And those were in the previous draft that we shared with you last month as well.
Okay. Are there any last questions or comments on this particular item? Item A. And if I understand correctly, this was just a discussion at this point, and this will come back to the agenda for next month for final vote from the board. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So we still have a little time if there's any additional comments between now and next month's meeting. But if you have any concerns about this tip, fiscal year 2022 to 2025 draft transportation improvement program, please make sure you make those comments before next month's meeting, because at that point we'll be proceeding to a vote.
Sorry, I want to make sure we hear it.
Yeah. I mean, it was, for the most part, it was fine. But then,
So there is somebody
those
online that
just
we can
like-
hear them talking. Do you have a question on item 5A under action items? Or if not, if you might be willing to mute your microphone. Thank you. Okay. All right. I don't think we have anything else to do with 5A at this point. Is that correct? All right, let's move on to 5B.
Thank you. Catherine Wingers, Transportation Planner, PPACG. This is for our fiscal year 2021 through 2024 TIP amendment. This is the currently adopted Transportation Improvement Program, or our short range plan that is currently adopted 2 years ago. So this is an amendment number 13 to that plan, but it's also an amendment number 1 to the FY 22 through 25 TIP if you approve it. So if you approve the new TIP next month, then we will make this update to that to coincide with this change request here. So we want to make sure that we keep the current document up to date and the future one that's planned for adoption. So just to make sure you understand why we have those two mixed in together. So the following changes in the table have been requested for our fiscal year 21 through 24 Transportation Improvement Program, and then amendment number 1 to the next one. There are 3 project changes. 2 of them are new projects to be added, and 1 is to add funds to one that's already currently listed in our document. So the first one is to add state SB 267 or State Bill 267 funds for Colorado Springs MMT Downtown Transit Center. It's currently listed in the document already. And so you see those original costs in fiscal year 22, and then these additional 1.5 million SB 267 funds to bring it to the updated total cost in the document. And then the next 2 projects are to add the new projects, and they were awarded SB 267 funds as well. The first one is for $100,000 to go to the Monument Parking Ride. And the second is for $600,000 for the Woodman Road Mobility Hub. The Transportation Advisory Committee and our Community Advisory Committee both recommend approval of this TIP amendment, and we are requesting your approval today.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions on this item? And there is a proposed motion in the package with a couple of items. Yes, Mr. Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the STAC meeting last week, they were pushing forward to the Traffic Commission and through STAC a number of 1 million, not 1.5 million on that downtown transit hub. Is this different than that, or is this prior to that passing? You have a clarification on that?
I can ask about that. I'm not sure. I don't know if Shane's on the line. He might have a little, he doesn't usually.
Yeah. Good morning, Shane Ferguson with CDOT. So the difference is what's identified here is the Senate Bill 267, 1.5 million. And what was discussed last week is 1 million of that Senate Bill 260 recently passed funding. That's that fiscal year 22 allocation. And so two different funding sources.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the packet, I double checked it before I asked the question, because the top of the handout at STAC said both SB 260 and SB 267. So thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Excellent question. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes, Don Wilson, do we know what the 100,000 for Monument Park and Ride is supposed to be used for? I don't see that in the packet.
And Shane Ferguson with CDOT. Mr. Wilson, I'll try to, I'm not exactly sure. My understanding of both of these two projects, it's going to be for primarily on the pre-construction side. So looking at the design modifications at the Monument Park and Ride, I couldn't tell you exactly what modifications are being looked at. I know that capacity is an issue, as you guys are very well aware of. And then the Woodman Road one's a very similar situation with capacity at that park and ride.
What is the capacity issue?
Well, I believe it's future capacity. It was trying to take a look at. And so I know that it's been looked at. I know they're looking at, how is bus staying and some of the other facilities going to enter in and out efficiently through those locations. And then Woodman Road is definitely I would say a smaller lot that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson, do you have a concern about it? Because if you do, maybe we need to at least understand what that concern is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what sort of capacity they're expanding. It's not a packed area.
I would say
it's
that
mostly empty parking lot 90% of the time.
I may have misspoke a little bit on that Monument Park and Ride. I know they're looking at definitely the exit and entrance movements for the bus staying and efficiency, if you will, from I-25 for Monument in particular. Woodman Road for sure is a capacity issue.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Is that acceptable? Because if we continue to have a concern.
Yeah, I'll have our town staff get with Mr. Ferguson and just to clarify on each entity's roles and where we're at on that and what we're looking for.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think for Mr. Ferguson, it was, if I can understand this correctly, it's a capacity issue on the Woodman Road Mobility Hub, and it is maybe an access issue to I-25 on the Monument Park and Ride.
Yes, that's going to be part of the evaluation, taking a look at access from I-25 to that Monument Park and Ride location. Correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. For that item, since it was, we did have questions from Mayor Wilson. Is the $100,000, is that an actual construction project of some type, or is that a study or evaluation?
It is not construction. It is going to be more of evaluation, study, design components.
Okay, so the Monument Park and Ride is a study, and then on the Woodman Road Mobility Hub is same question. It's that's a little bit bigger, so that's probably actual work.
It's going to be that. To my understanding, sir, it's still steady and potentially allocating funding for right of way if needed. And so that's not going to be construction at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions on this particular item? Item 5B.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I had to step out for a few minutes, so y'all didn't have to hear me sneezing and everything. So, I had brought up the question on Friday at the pre-meeting about on the Downtown Transit Center about a workshop that I had attended through CML and the electric vehicle standards. I wanted to make sure that the projects that we are funding for a lot of money are going to be using those electric vehicle standards, because one of the suggestions was that permanent transit centers do have the charging stations for people that are going to be using the buses and leaving their vehicles there. And so we want to make sure we're incorporating those standards, because I don't want to build a $20 million project and then we have to tear it up in a year to add electric vehicle charging stations somewhere. So I want to make sure that's being included in the design, even if it's not built in the project now, that the space is set aside so we don't have to be redoing it in 2 or 3 years.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, do you have a response to that?
I would have to defer to Colorado Springs Mountain Metro. That's the agency for the downtown transit.
Yeah, Commissioner Vanderwerf, this is Brian Vituli from the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit. So we are not quite at the design phase for this project. We're still trying to negotiate agreements with the private property owner to move forward with this project. But as Councilmember Thompson said, charging stations will be looked at. You know, this will probably not have an additional parking facility as part of the transit center. But if it is a multi-use development, you know, it's quite logical to have something like that in the design. But we're kind of far from that point right now.
Well, yeah, every time we hear about these projects for the rail station to busing to transportation, we're always talking about that last quarter mile, half mile or something. Where do people park? How do they get home to and from the bus? So just trying to be forward thinking. We're supposed to be forward thinking, right? That we're incorporating those things into the plan rather than an afterthought. Let's purchase some more land and stick it next door or something. So I know I'm just asking that be considered. So I know you're not ready yet, but I think it should be in there. So.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a great question. And Mr. Vituli, it sounds like charging stations are a design consideration. So it is not something that will be ignored, if I understand correctly. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I mean, we've been 40 years in our current facility, and you know, we've been trying to move into a new facility with 8 different studies to locate a new facility, and 20 years have passed since we've been, you know, looking at this. So we will certainly make this a state-of-the-art facility, and it will have many more amenities than our current terminal has, and it will be a first-rate facility.
Okay, very good. Is that to your satisfaction? Yep. Okay, very good. Sounds like it's a design consideration for the construction, and not knowing where that design will go, at least it will be included as a consideration when they go through that evaluation. And that's what it sounds like to me. Excuse me. All right. Are there any other questions on this item?
Just a general clarification for Andy. Since this is FY22, if we pass this amendment, it can still be amended in the future, correct?
Pretty certain, yes. Got a head nod from Catherine, so yes, we can. You can amend it.
Okay, thank you.
I presume the reason for that question is you'll be going back to your own team and just checking to see if this is making sense to them or not. And if it doesn't, then you'll bring that back to us.
Right, we'll work with CDOT on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And just one clarification, since this is a CDOT project, to make the amendment, it would need to be them to make the formal change, obviously working with you, but it would need to come from them.
Okay.
Okay, very good. All right, any other questions on this item? Good discussion.
And this was just point of clarification, amendment number 13 for this fiscal year for this tip. So plenty of amendments still to come, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Plenty of amendments to come. All right, so there is a proposed motion in the language. It's up on the screen. I'll entertain a motion at this point, either that motion that's listed, or if someone wants to make a different motion, we have obviously the option to disapprove if someone
Would
wants
you
to make a
mind
motion.
reading what's on the screen?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Avila. So the proposed motion says approval of amendment number 13 to the fiscal year 2021 to 2024 tip, and amend number 1 to the fiscal year 2022 to 2025 tip. And that's a little geeky in the language, but that's what the words say.
Motion to approve. Mayor Wilson.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second Commissioner Stone.
All right, then Councilmember Avila, did you have any questions on that? If you have a look on your face like, wow, those words look tough.
Well, I was just wondering, like 13 and 1, I was like, what's 13 and what's 1? And I know you guys had a discussion while I was out there, so.
I'm happy to.
Would you, yeah, please clarify
Of
that
course.
for the council member.
Yes. So our current tip is fiscal year 21 through 24, and that would make it, this would make it amendment number 13 to that document. We're in the process of adopting the 22 through 25 tip, which is what we just, the first item, and it's proposed for adoption in August. So this amendment would ensure that we are in alignment in our current tip and the future one that you plan to, or that is proposed for adoption in August. That amendment number 1 will not happen unless the document is approved, or the 22 through 25 tip is approved. So there's 2 tips happening and we need to keep them both up to date essentially.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Are there any last questions or concerns about this item, item 5B? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Let's move on to 5C, Transportation System Functional Classification Change Requests. It looks like this is a Manitou Springs item.
And I'll be taking care of that as well.
Thank you.
Catherine Wenger, Senior Transportation Planner, PPACG. So this is a request for a functional classification change for Manitou Springs roadways. The functional classification of roads and highways for this particular, these classifications are through Federal Highway or our federal partners. This is their highway network that that identifies and is a hierarchy of roadways to properly channel transportation movements through our network efficiently and cost effectively. So it identifies roadways based on their ADT, how they connect to communities, how they connect to other roads, and based on a different data, also kind of speeds and number of lanes. Lots of different things go into identifying the hierarchy of roadways for the functional classification system. So we do, CDOT does maintain these categorized roadway networks within our state. And we as an MPO or a metropolitan planning organization are kind of in charge of maintaining and making sure that our area is up to date for our hierarchy. Often these changes can take form of, we have to make changes to these roadways based on new data and growth in the area. And often these will take place due to constructions, realignment, widenings, that sort of thing. So we do want to make sure we maintain this. And the reason why this is so important is because these functional classifications are important for being eligible for federal grant funds. And so we like to make sure that they're up to date so that roadways can be eligible to ask for the grant funds that we allocate through our region and that also go through other federal programs as well. So there are 3 general situations where we do make these updates. There can be a request to the MPO through our local jurisdictions if they just have one or 2 roadways that they'd like to change. There's also periodic reviews that we do to make these updates. And then there's also a review typically about every 10 years that coincides with the census. So there's a few different reasons to do these. Ours is that we are actually doing a full review of the entire MPO region. Because we haven't done this in about 12 years is what I understand. So a full review hasn't been done then. I think a few things here and there have been changed, but we're doing a full review and we're working with each jurisdiction to identify roadways that they feel should be updated based on new data. And so our GIS team did a really great job analyzing these roadways with the new data. And then we made recommendations to the jurisdictions on making these updates. And so we did work really closely with the planners and the engineers in your areas to make these updates. We didn't just do this unilaterally. And so this particular one is for Manitou Springs, and we brought you Monument last month or 2 months ago, and we'll be bringing you other jurisdictions later in the months as well. So you'll see more coming down the road. So we are taking them piece by piece because some of them have a lot of roadways that need to get changed for El Paso County, for instance, and that sort of thing. So Manitou Springs would like to request changes to some of the roadways in their area based on our recommendations and their full review. There are 5 roadway segments that they would like to change to local roads classification. There are 7 local roads that would be increasing to federal aid eligible federal classifications. And I say it that way because local roads identification are not eligible for federal funding, but anything that's a major collector or above, or excuse me, a collector or above in the urban area and major collector in the rural identification are eligible for federal funding. And then finally, 15 are going to be staying federal aid eligible, but are updating their classification to more accurately reflect their function within the transportation system. The details are outlined in the attachment, and there's also a letter that will be going to CDOT for the request. And there is a letter from Manitou Springs officially asking for that. And then there's tables with the data to back up this request as well in that. So with that, we have TAC, our Transportation Advisory Committee, and our Community Advisory Committee both recommend approval for this functional classification change request. And we're asking your approval today. And then we would forward this to CDOT for their review and approval. And then they would forward that to Federal Highway for their final approval and inclusion in and updates.
Very good. Thank you.
Yolanda, move to approve.
All right, there's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second John Graham, Manitou.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on these items?
I just have one comment.
Yes, please.
I wanted to, we didn't have a large gathering Friday at the pre-meeting. So John Liazanos, you had made a comment that I think is kind of interesting to people, that what we as a city or municipality classify a road at doesn't necessarily have to do with this document. I thought maybe you could kind of just clarify that a little bit for the whole group, because I just think it's a very valuable comment.
Sure. In fact, you basically just said it right there. It doesn't matter what your local jurisdiction has a road classified. What matters from the federal process is how it appears in the federal classification maps. So Colorado Springs could have a roadway that they classify, major collector, major arterial roadway on their map. The feds don't check your documents. So on the federal map, if it shows it as local, that means it's local and it's not eligible funds unless it gets on this map. So that's why you have to make sure that if you have your own documents within your jurisdiction, you don't get overconfident that that is in fact, the way it's classified on the federal maps, because that is what controls when it comes to being eligible for federal funding. So thank you.
So if you have a road that you're starting to have difficulty with, you really need to contact PPACG about potentially starting that process to get it reclassified, because this could take a while potentially.
Yes, and I would say that no matter what, if you're in the MPO or not, if you have anything that you're working on, feel free to reach out to us. If you're within the MPO, we're sort of the first stop for it. If you're outside of the MPO area, we can help you, and it's going to be CDOT, because you're part of the Transportation Planning Region or the Central Front Range TPR. That would start the process, and then you'd run through CDOT to get your classification changed. So the classifications are inside and outside the MPO area, and it's always a good idea to make sure you're constant with your classification. So that way, I think the fun thing we like to say here in Colorado is money falls from the sky. You are classified correctly to take advantage of that. For example, we've got the RISE grants and other federal monies, right? Your classification on the federal system, even if you're outside the MPO, matters. And CDOT's a great partner, so we can make sure we get you hooked up with the right folks over at CDOT on that. So regardless of where you're located, reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you no matter what.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great comments. Any other questions or comments? I'll just make one point. I'm glad that we're going through this to make sure that these roads are properly classified. It looks like It has been a while since we've done this, so I'm glad that we're doing it. It looks like we completed Monument, and assuming this vote is successful today, we will have completed Manitou Springs. I presume the other municipalities, and I think this also applies to counties, right? So other municipalities and counties are also working on this. Is that correct?
Correct. And I've heard that it likely in August, you'll see El Paso County come through, and as well as Woodland Park. And so El Paso County piece would just be the MPO region, but we're also working with them to help them identify outside of the region, and that would go directly to CDOT, like John said. So we're also helping with that piece as well.
Okay, great. And since we have 3 counties and 13 municipalities, I'm hopeful that maybe we'll be able to successfully work through all of them sometime, maybe sometime this year, so that they can be properly classified. So we can be hopeful for that, right?
Yes, I'll chat with John and our GIS team and see if we can reach out beyond our MPO and try to see what we can do to help out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point was just made. It really is also beneficial for people outside the MPO as well, right? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second, and no other questions, I don't believe. So let's go ahead and proceed with the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that passes also unanimously. It's moved to item 5D, the 2021 budget amendment. You have to have the red light. There you go. Now it's on.
I'm sorry, Casey Partridge, Finance Manager, PPACG. I'm here today to request a budget amendment for our 2021 budget. I'm sorry, yeah, 2021 budget. We've not had a budget amendment since 2019, and we are requesting for this year a budget amendment of $3,073,589,000 in revenue and expense. There is no net effect on this budget amendment. We are also requesting an increase in FTEs from 35.5 that was approved in our original budget to 37.75. This is no increase in personnel costs due to savings that we've had through the year with positions being opened and savings on employees not taking benefits throughout the year. There will be an impact next year on these positions. One of the positions is an ombudsman position. The state's requesting that we get another ombudsman for a special PACE program, it's called. They've supplied additional funding for that. We are also requesting that one of our 3/4 time positions be moved to a full-time position, and then 2 part-time interns for the transportation department. So those will have no benefits with those positions. If you look at the proposed budget amendment, we are requesting $600,000 increase in state and federal grants. AAA, our aging department, has received additional funding for the ombudsman program, also for a senior vaccine education program, and programs to reduce social isolation for our seniors. Transportation's received additional funding for a tri-county study and a geolocating project that we're working on. PPAC has also received additional funding while we did the small business relief program that DOLA asked us to do. There was additional funding that we received directly for that into PPACG. And we're also asking for additional budget for potential intergovernmental service agreement program that's we've included in here. We've asked for an additional $50,000 in program income. This will be a local match is needed for the intergovernmental service agreement program if it's pursued. Pass-through revenues are also grant revenues that we pass directly on to some of our providers. And this was also part of the small business relief program that we did. So we have additional grant funding for AAA program, carryover funds for the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year that we did not spend will roll into the AAA's 21-22 budget. And then we also got additional program funding for the American Rescue Plan for COVID. We've also, again, the small business relief, And these funds are matched in expenses as pass-through expenditures down on the bottom line. So there's no net effect on that for our financials. As far as expenses, we're asking for $623,000 increase in contract services. This is for increase in audit fees this year due to additional programs. As our programs grow, there's additional audits that are required for our federal grants. We've asked for an increase in legal fees for the voluntary correction program for our retirement program. We've asked for additional contract services for the Drive Smart transition that the board approved a few months ago. Market study for salary staff. The HR department has asked for that. And then additional services to support the senior vaccine education, the small business relief program, the Tri-County study, and the geolocating grant. So as funds come in, they go out, and we're asking those to go out in contract services. We're also asking for $600 in travel. And this is actually for reimbursement of some expenses for missing equipment, $20,000 for program supplies. This is, again, our AAA program to reduce social isolation in seniors. We buy supplies, hand them out to seniors, all kinds of activities for them and different equipment that's needed. $600 in support services. This is advertising for additional staffing, putting things out into the special advertising boards for specific staff purposes. $1,000 in depreciation. We had some 2020 year-end capital adjustments that need to be done that are affecting our depreciation. And then equipment, additional computers. Again, a lot of remote work and a lot of staff need additional services. So again, overall, there's no net effect. This is our first budget amendment. Hopefully we don't have 13 like HIP amendments, but hopefully we only have to do one a year. And so the managers and Andy and I are requesting the approval of a budget amendment. Any questions?
Great. Are there any questions from any of the board members?
What's the Tri-County study?
Tri-County study, John?
John, that's your cue. We've
Yes.
talked about this for a while
Yeah,
and
we
it's
have. I
finally
just-
getting started.
yeah.
Tri-County study, if you could say a few words.
Short, sweet, you only get 25 words.
25 words is, what is the Tri-County study? Okay. The, back when the board had its retreat back in 2018, I believe, the topic came up, hey, you do a lot of planning for the NPO area, that urbanized area, but it'd be nice to have a consistent, cohesive plan for how we move about within that the Tri-County area. Because CDOT does a great job of planning for the interstate and the state system, but what about the level below that? How do we interact? What's the multimodal? So when the multimodal options fund came, we worked closely with CDOT. Wendy Pettit did a great job of helping us find the funding, as well as our other CDOT partners. So we were able to secure the funds to do the Tri-County study. And in the end, what it's intended to be is looking at the level below the state system and how we interact, not only on the roadways, but transit and express bus and other sorts of, to be a complete multimodal a look at it. I suspect if you're in Colorado Springs and the urbanized part of El Paso County, the best part of this study for you is going to be maybe looking at what's the next sort of loop outside of Powers. What's that next sort of ring? If you're a part of the Park County, I know Commissioner Elsner was asking about, can we look at things like funding for, there's a federal lands access program. Is it possible to have a state land access program? Because a lot of the, for hopefully this is not a term that offends anyone, but the rural counties, they get a lot of tourism, but they don't get a lot of money to account for that. So in 25 words or less, the Tri-County study is going to be all things to all people, depending on where you're located. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to deliver on that. Because again, we always sort of work in silos. Well, let's talk about the urbanized area. Let's talk about what CDOT. We want to see if we can't sort of break down those silos and have a comprehensive look on how you move around within the 3 counties. And in addition, I think we really won't have much of a choice, but we'll have to also include, is it Fremont County? That's also part of the Central Front Range TPR? Or is it Custer? I'm sorry, I'm at a loss, but there's one county that's part of the Central Front Range that's not part of PPACG. And I think even though it's not part of it, we still have to really interact with them, because we can't just pretend like, oh, well, people don't cross this line on a piece of paper. They do, so we want to make sure that we're capturing everything.
John, it's Custer.
Custer, thank you. Angels. Angels.
Somebody online gave Custer, so thank you for
That is
that.
Custer. So not either one of the ones I actually mentioned.
So that was a great explanation, but that was nowhere close to 25 words, John. However, it was a great explanation.
Is there a fine of 5 cents a word over the, yeah, okay.
Are there any other questions on this item, the budget amendment, item 5D? Yes, Councilmember Avila.
I don't have any questions, but I just have a comment. You know, I was a treasurer for a year with Casey, and she did an outstanding job. And so now we have more programs, you know, we have more money coming in, and we have more need for staff and doing studies and reports. So I think, you know, I think this is a good amendment.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yes, Andy, did you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate those comments, and we're very mindful of making sure that we don't grow beyond our needs. This has to match the grants that we come in, as Casey was describing, so it's sort of a delicate, tricky balancing act, but we are able to go after additional grants and help us out with additional work we're doing, like with the Ombudsman program and the Tri-County study and so forth. I did want to mention, because this came up at the Friday workshop, about the one item Casey mentioned about intergovernmental support agreements. That's an item that I'll bring back to the board hopefully next month. This hasn't been brought to you before because I don't think it's been really ripe yet, but it's part of an ongoing conversation that we've had with our local jurisdictions, and specifically the city, the county, and the city of Fountain primarily, and with our military installations, about potentially putting together a regional blanket intergovernmental support agreement. And just the nutshell of that, and I will stay under 25 words, is that it's providing local municipal services on military installations where it makes sense. So we've been having conversations for the past several months around this. The reason it's in front of you today is that if it is decided that the PPACG board would like us to move forward with this program, we needed the budget capacity to apply for a grant to help to put the program together, basically to hire some professional services for procurement and legal services and so forth. So that's why it may seem a little bit out of sequence where you're hearing about it today as a budget amendment, but in no way does that box us in as the board or me to apply for this grant. I definitely wouldn't apply for it and pursue this program unless the board is comfortable with that. So we'll talk more about it here in the coming months.
Thank you. And for the board's understanding on that item, because we've had several conversations just prior to this board. So this budget amendment basically sets aside some money for that, should it go forward, which can be reallocated to something else if we decide not to go forward. But this budget amendment does not authorize the spending of those funds against the IGSA until that has been presented and vetted by the board and voted on. So that is not approved for going forward, but it does set aside some dollars at this point in time, and just needed to make that clear for everybody, because that particular item has not been discussed at the board level so far.
Absolutely. And what we need to do is always stay within our budget and under budget for our grants and reporting. So they want to make sure that we're within our budget. That's why we want to make sure that the capacity is there. I just also thank you, Yolanda, for the comments. And I do want to make sure that the board is aware we are not asking at this time for an increase in any dues. We've not asked for any dues increase since 2016. And I wanted to let you know that in 2016, we had 14 funding sources. Now we have 31 funding sources that we're dealing with. So we do continue to grow. We do need, you know, manage the dues very delicately to make sure that we have those to match the grants that are required to have matches in them. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. And I was going to make those points, but you actually have now made them for me. And I do, since there are no dues increases requests here, this is really just trying to match manpower to the grant money that's coming in and some of the programs that we've picked up. One that I think is notable, you talked about the ombudsman program, but we also picked up Drive Smart. We all voted on that here last month or two. I forget exactly when it was, but it wasn't too long ago. So there are other programs that we've been slowly, picking up, and that to one degree or another, that makes sense because we're a growing community, increasing in population. That's also increasing in power as well. So it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody that we might grow an FTE or two from time to time within the board of PPA or within the staff of PPACG.
So with that, I'd like to move to approve this budget amendment because of their efficiency and how they're maintaining that fine balance.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Avila. There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Mayor Wilson.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any last comments or questions on this item? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? And that passes unanimously as well. So let's move on now to item 6A. These are information items and do not need to be voted on.
Good morning, board members. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. I'm here to talk to you about the air quality control.
Commissioner Vanderwerf? There is no sound.
Holly, it looks like you may have become host possibly, because I think they went away.
How am I host?
Well, I had this happen at one of our BOCC meetings, and it just randomly picked somebody and made them host when we lost our connection.
Oh, okay.
Which the people on the meeting thought was very humorous.
All right. Let me, I guess let's all sign off and sign back in.
Or let them sign back in.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can do that. If you've got a number for Stan,
Holly,
give him a call.
Holly, this is Laura Cruz. I'm trying to call Jess B to let her know that something's going wrong. So give me just a minute.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, I just let our IT person Jesse know, and he's running downstairs to let them know we can't hear anything.
Thank you.
No problem. That's why we try to keep one person on Zoom so we can tell when something's gone wrong. You're muted, Holly.
Since I'm the host, I'd like to move that the Air Quality Control Commission be disbanded. Oh, well, sorry, can't do that.
Like that. Specifically, of course, in my mind, some things that pop up immediately, should this rule move to cover the Pikes Peak region as the second and third order effects that would have on local businesses that are directly affected by it, but the second and third order of surrounding businesses, the impacts that it may have on, our central business areas. Is that part of the rulemaking process with them, is to look at second and third order? Or are they pretty much just looking at the ideology and trying to pass rules that match the ideology?
So the Air Quality Control Department sits down and reviews what the proposal will impact financially. Because the proposal is only areas in non-attainment, Denver and North Front Range, it has utterly no information or analysis on how it will impact anyone else. So no. What they have and have provided does not include any of that impact for any of the regions outside of Denver, which already have several of these programs in place.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Thank you for confirming.
And just to elaborate on that, it's a great point, great question, because one of the arguments that we're making is that leave us out of the program. We meet all the other air quality standards, including ozone. Plus, we don't have that infrastructure and the overall structure in place like they have in the Denver metro area and the North Front Range, where they have travel reduction programs already. We would be starting from scratch. So I forget what the economic analysis showed for the impact in the Denver and North Front Range area, but it was anywhere from $8,000 per employee to hundreds of thousands of dollars per employee to implement it there. It's going to be even higher here if we have to start setting up van pools and carpools and things like that from scratch. And we just think that's really blatantly unfair.
And that's 7,000 to 811,000 per business per year is the estimated cost to individual businesses to implement an employee trip reduction plan.
Yeah, and we've talked about this internally with our partners at the chamber. We think that having a voluntary program would make a lot of sense. We're not suggesting that as an alternative proposal. We want to stay out of it altogether. But I think there's a lot of merit in voluntarily working with our major employers to see if there are ways we can reduce travel. We all want to reduce emissions and reduce peak hour congestion. We would love to do that. But this isn't the way to go about doing it, in our opinion.
And another part of that I think is important for us to point out is Denver and the North Front Range region get state and federal funds to start these programs and to run the programs that they already have in place. We would not receive any funding. The non-attainment funding that we heard about in our presentation this morning, not applicable to us. We can't have it. We're in attainment. So all of the funding that would help anyone implement this type of program would not exist for us.
I just want to repeat and make sure I heard this right. Potential cost is $8,000 and up per employee.
Per business.
Per business per year.
Mm-hmm.
Up to have over 100 employees.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so $8,000 really seems a little low.
I have a feeling that if you're just a 100-person business, you're going to be on the higher range because you've got no idea how to implement it. And you don't have enough people to do it.
And it's my understanding that that's 100 people at each site. So I think at the City of Fountain, we were saying because we don't necessarily have 100 people at one location, they're kind of spread out that it might not apply to us. So if you have 100 employees, don't panic and not buy hire the 101st, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're spread out, yeah, rents are bad enough. But anyways, okay. So okay, I just want to make sure people are understanding it. But $8,000 and up per company to potentially implement this program. And I am assuming, since this will be mandatory, not voluntary, that there would be fines or fees if you do not implement it?
That as the proposal is written, yes, there are fines for people who do not. Recording in progress.
I muted it and made it worse.
Now we can't hear.
Okay, let's try one more time. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions on this item? And I've got a few I'll make myself.
This is Commissioner Williams.
Please.
My one question was, what is their enforcement mechanism on this? Is everybody going to be sitting outside the businesses, checking to see how many cars enter? We're going to have a whole new department of, air quality police?
That level of detail is not listed in the proposal at this time. Likely, I believe it will probably be done through tax purposes, but another issue that didn't come up is they're measuring it based on the number of employees who were there during 2020. So when there weren't as many people in the office, courtesy of COVID, you still have to do the same percentage reduction. That's your base number for what you're reducing from. Yeah, Sharon's making a great face, so.
Sorry, I should put a mask on. Yeah. So if I could just make some comments in the package, and I'd like to actually confirm that this is still accurate. There is a public comment session on August 18, which is online from 4:30 to 7:30. I would encourage members of this board to either dial in, listen in, or maybe even offer comments at that time. And then you mentioned a hearing on Monday, the 19th. There is a second section in the package here. It says party testimony and deliberations, which is just listed as sometime between August 18 and August 20. So I think you've got confirmation that it is on the 19th, or maybe not sure.
The 19th is when they begin hearing for public testimony for all of the proposed rules that they are looking at the same time. There are more than one engaged in this discussion. It is, I can give you the list. We only care about Rule 22, Regulation 22, and there are 3 other ones engaged in this. Regulation 11.
Yeah, you have in the package 11, 20, and 22. Is there a 4th one?
No,
No,
but
okay.
11 and 20 do not relate to us. We are only looking at a very specific section of 22.
So you have a paragraph in the package for 22, but I don't see any reference to this becoming either front range wide or statewide. So is the current proposed rule number 22 not including our area? So it's a matter of what they deliberate over.
The proposed rule is only areas in non-attainment.
Okay.
Zero effect to us. We're hoping honestly, what we're telling them is don't change the proposed rule.
The challenge, just to elaborate on that, is that when they wrote the notice for the rulemaking process and for the hearings, it was wide enough to where they could expand the scope and the geographic reach of it. So that's what our concerns are. And those comments came up at the initiation hearing back in May, where at least one commissioner and others sort of agreed that, yeah, we should look at expanding this beyond just those urban areas that are in non-attainment. So that's what got our ire up.
So the proposal as written and the proposal as currently being seen and voted upon does not relate to us. It's great. It's fine. It's if they change the proposal is our major concern.
Okay.
So we'll be doing a whole lot of don't change it.
And there is a way for the public to enter comments either orally or in writing. The writing would be prior to the hearing.
Yes.
I see this in the package under public comment. So I would encourage members of the board, if you wish to provide, you can either provide public comment online, in person, or prior to the hearing on the 18th by submitting them in writing. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this particular item? Yes.
Jessica, this might not, I don't know, but we've talked for years how close we are to being out of attainment. Right? If you get out of attainment, how soon do those rules go into effect on your community so that people have time to understand it and adapt?
Not currently in the regulation proposal. So we don't know how it would work. What we do know is EPA and the state can kind of give a grace period and an adjustment. Currently, we've been told that's unlikely to be asked for by the state. For wildfire exemptions for air quality, were we able to exempt those? Our air quality would be much farther in attainment and nowhere near at risk. But so it does require a coordination with the state and the EPA before you go into non-attainment. It is not an instantaneous part. You would know from your data that you've reached non-attainment before the EPA would declare you in non-attainment by at least 1 year and frequently 2. So.
It's not a clean and easy process where you just flip a switch and we find out, oh, we're going to be in non-attainment because of our ozone measurements. It could take years until the state, working with us, our region, working with EPA, actually get us designated as non-attainment if that were to happen. Then after that, we have no idea how that would invoke these requirements that we're talking about today.
I just don't think most business owners are really paying attention to details at this level. You're just trying to keep your doors open, especially right now. So, $8,000 per hit to some people is a lot of money. Some people it's just the price of doing business, but some people it's a lot of money, especially right now. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions on this item? All right, hearing none. Let's appreciate the update and let's go to the strategic plan update 6B.
Good afternoon again, board members. Still me.
Oh,
Still, it's morning. Well, it's afternoon and on the East Coast, so maybe it can
Yes.
count if you're,
I'm pretending I'm
know.
talking to my grandma, okay? So as we do every quarter, we try to provide you an update with progress we're making on your strategic plan goals that you updated just this past October. Our goal, as you all know, is to maintain the strategic plan as a live document. This will never be a shelf project. This is always something that you can look at on our website and hear from us every quarter what we're doing, because there will always be something happening. It guides our actions. I'm not going to go through each and every single one of our goals and objectives that we have moved forward on, but I'll highlight a few of them. Obviously, under advocacy, building coalitions with stakeholders, we'll talk a whole lot about what we just talked about, that AQCC, E-Trip rulemaking. We've done a lot of information this year during the legislative session. We provided our transportation funding statement. We did a lot of discussion before Senate Bill 21-260 was introduced and engaged in that discussion. We've invited legislators and had several join us at PPACG board meetings throughout the legislative session so that we could talk to them and they could tell us what's going on from their perspectives. And then we've also met with Senator Bennett's and Senator Hickenlooper's staff members on different PPACG roles in the community, activities we're currently engaged on. That was done at a staff level. We're hoping to have them join us for a meeting with everyone. Interesting stuff under information sharing. Our new online GIS mapping application is allowing regional jurisdictions to really quickly and easily look at the federal highway FHWA, because I don't remember what WA stands for, roadway functional classes to really help determine federal funding. Again, that was something that came up just a little bit earlier. We've already trained our regional jurisdictions, transit providers, and other key stakeholders to really look at those critical administrative boundaries. We've been doing a traffic safety outreach program like we did last year, where people will be seeing social media and radio ads this year, reminding people, please drive safely. Summer is one of the worst times for, and most dangerous times for people driving distracted, driving drunk, and being dangerous around motorcycles, as I'm sure you all can imagine. We've had some great conversations with our GIS staff, with Monument, Manitou, and Woodland Park to evaluate those functional roadway classes that came up in conversation earlier. Under aging, we've distributed CDOT emergency funds to HSPs, human service providers, for transportation services for vulnerable populations, especially seniors in our case. We've been managing funds from the Feds for Recovery. We've expanded our outreach. This year, we've always done this. For the past 6 years, we've done an Ent retirement series where we go through 4 or 5 classes in coordination that we develop with Ent to provide folks coming up on retirement with the information they need. Estate planning, Medicare, Social Security, and what life is like and how to plan for those things you need to know as a person rather than just financially. Those have always been done just in the Pikes Peak region. We expanded that program statewide this year. So our highest attendee in previous years was 34 people. We had 137 register for one of our classes this year. So that expansion of that program has gone beyond words to really do a great thing. That was our spring program. We are running a fall program as well. We've expanded our outreach with PPLD, and now we've got a partnership with the Security Public Library to run Medicare assistance webinars. At noon today is the very first one of that program on Medicare and TRICARE. I mentioned the CARES Act funding. We continue to work on senior housing issues, trying to engage in that issue as it comes up for both affordability and merely its existence. Transportation. We've got great updates from Catherine and John earlier. Some of our major things, as always, we're sharing data between agencies. We really are doing a lot of work. There's reducing duplication, any aspects of it. Tri-county study that we mentioned earlier is one of our major things on the
strategic plan under exploring and pursuing funding mechanisms. The Tri-County study is going to let us know what we can do. And then obviously we've been participating in the stack with board and staff. We received our implementation phase 2 grant for the military planning program. I don't know if that grant's still titled JLUS or not, but it's military planning. We've continued to monitor legislation relating to wildfire prevention, as that's an issue that crosses all boundaries and is very important to all of you, we know. And began scheduling our 2021 member outreach visits. If your administrative team hasn't already heard from me, they will be hearing soon. We're beginning those tomorrow with Woodland Park, and we'll be running those a few a month. We're trying not to do too many, where we tell your local governments on a whole, not just our wonderful representatives, but here's what PPACG does, and here's what we're specifically doing today in your region. So we're very much hoping that that will make sure that all of your cohorts and folks know what else is happening. Does anyone have any questions about our strategic plan, our action reports, how we do things, what we do?
Are there any questions on this particular item 6B? And what Jessica mentioned is actually in the document, so you can review them at your leisure later on as well. All right, hearing none, thank you very much. Let's go ahead on to reports. And I don't have the full list of who's here from our military installations, but I know Colonel Fitch is here. So perhaps we could start with Colonel Fitch, and then if there's others, we'll follow up.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I appreciate the mention of a strategic plan of outreach. As you well know, we have a new commander at the garrison that oversees Peterson, Schriever, and Cheyenne Mountain. He is Colonel Shea Warakomsky. He was unfortunately unable to join us today, but hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to introduce you to him as well. And for those who don't know, we have a ceremony set for the 26th of July, currently midday, 11:30, tentative time, but the date is solid for the base renamings. So Peterson and Schriever Air Force bases will become Peterson and Schriever Space Force bases, very exciting. And Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station will become Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. That's all I have for you today.
Great. Wow, that's great information. That ceremony sounds like it'll be a lot of fun.
So there'll be 3 concurrent ceremonies, and invitations are going out shortly. If you're interested in any of them, they will all occur at the same time at each of the installations.
Great. Thank you, Colonel. Are there any other representatives from the military installations? I just don't have the full list available in front of me of who's online. All right, hearing none. Well, actually, let's just kind of go through the list. Do we have anybody else? Oh, okay. And then item 7B through 7F, the minutes are included in the package, so we don't need to go over them here in the meeting. And item 7G, the CDOT monthly update.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board. Shane Ferguson with Region 2. I'll be providing the CDOT update this morning. In regards to the MAMSET project, Military Access Mobility Safety Improvement Project, we are currently actively this week working on financial negotiations with the contractor. Our hope is that with successful negotiations, we will begin work on the first piece on I-25 early September, with the other pieces being State Highway 94, Charter Oaks Ranch Road, and the South Academy Bridge on I-25. Progressing shortly after. So fingers crossed as we continue to move forward on that project. Regarding the Research and Powers Interchange project, that project is well underway. I'd like to remind everyone as you drive through these projects, please slow down for the work zone. We will continue to see an increase of activity on this project in particular, with traffic shifts later this summer, continued traffic shifts later this summer. The I-25 ramps resurfacing project is progressing well as well. That is the Interquest, North Academy, Briargate, and the State Highway 115 and NORAD exits. Resurfacing of the ramps themselves. We expect to finish that this project late July, early August. Within El Paso County, we have a bridge replacement between Callahan and Peyton that's progressing. That project is about halfway through and likely will open US 24 back to normal in late September. Within Park County, a couple of projects that we'd like to highlight. The Wilkerson Pass Safety Improvements Project, where we are providing safety improvements on the west side of the pass. We're widening shoulders and adding guardrail as well as some pavement correction for the curves in that location. You'll see this week and next removal of trees as well as a significant amount of earthwork activity. We do not expect any flagging or single lane closures at this time, but be aware that that activity could increase with some single lane closures in the near couple of weeks on that location. And then the other project to highlight on Park County is the bridge replacement project south of Fairplay on US 285 over the South Platte River. The work currently is outside of the bridge, staging and earthwork and getting the activities in place just to get through some of the environmental restrictions where bird nesting, et cetera, is currently taking place. And so we're expecting that to essentially be available for the bridge to come down in August with that detour coming in place shortly after, so, or during that time. So that is primarily our construction activity to highlight at this time. We do have a number of projects that are definitely under the pre-construction side of the house moving forward on, for instance, the State Highway 115, the US 285 and State Highway 9 intersections, a number of others that progressing well. The I-25, Fillmore to Garden the Gods, acceleration, deceleration lane, that project is getting underway as well. With that, I will open it up for questions if you guys have any.
This is Dick Elsner, Park County.
Yes, Commissioner.
I've got a question for you because there seems to be some confusion. When we saw the plans you had for the bridge replacement, you know, you were working on the intersection of 9 and 285 near Fairplay to make that a little easier. And we also thought you were going to do some work at 9 and 24 to provide a better right turn lane for people that have to follow that detour.
Right.
Then there was some question as to, I guess someone asked about the part down by Hartselle, and they said, well, we don't think that's on our plans. We thought it was.
That would have to be during the detour piece once we open that up. Tell you what, Commissioner, let me follow up and make sure that that is the case. But I'm under the same impression. I thought we were going to do some improvements there in the Hartselle area of 9 and 24 for widening or assisting with those turn movements essentially at that intersection. And that's what you're referring to, correct, sir?
That is correct. The problem you have if you get one large RV that wants to go eastbound on 24, it can back up traffic westbound on 24 or on 9 a long ways because no one can get around to make a right turn.
So yes, sir. Let me double check on that and I will get back with you shortly.
Sounds great. Thank you much.
Okay, great. Yes, please go ahead. Another question.
Shane, could you contact me about a couple of requests we've put in for street sweeping on 85 and graffiti on the wall at exit 128? We haven't had any response from them.
Yes, Councilwoman, I will.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions for Mr. Ferguson? Just a quick one from me. I'm just not remembering what it was, but I think I saw an announcement yesterday or the day before about some ramp closures that are going to be closed for some time. I don't know if it was about placing a bridge over 25 or something like that. I don't know if I can recall what that is.
County line.
It's county line. And how long is that going to be closed?
I'll let Shane take that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll need to double check on that. I can't imagine that it's going to be, it's probably likely night closures is what's being discussed. Again, that's for the bridge replacement at County Line Road. I'll have to double check and get back with you, Commissioner, regarding what the intent is or the duration is.
I appreciate that. If you could maybe send an email to Andy, and Andy can get it out to the entire board. I may
Sure
have
will.
misread the announcement, but it sounded like a 24/7 closure for a fairly long period of time. And there's a lot of people coming and going on County Line Road. And I think if I read it right, that's going to be one heck of an impact.
Follow up on you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions for Mr. Ferguson on the CDOT monthly update? All right, hearing none, how about a stack update?
Mr. Chairman, I attended the STAC meeting as the alternate in lieu of Commissioner Williams, who was at NACO last week. It was quite an interesting meeting just because they presented to STAC the slated projects for the $238 million package that they put together under Senate Bill 260 and 267. For specific to Region 2, they moved forward projects for I-25 was the major project, I-25 between Fillmore Garden of the Gods, $40 million project for paving and mobility. They allocated $700,000 for a South Central storage and maintenance facility on I-25. On State Highway 21 and Airport Road interchange, they've allocated $4 million for the construction design. And then in some non-corridor specific areas for allocation, they allocated an additional $1 million, which I don't think has shown up, as we talked about earlier, for the Colorado Springs Downtown Transit Center. They also allocated $1 million to the Pueblo Transit Downtown Transit Center Phase 2 improvements. And they also allocated $1.25 million for Mustang fleet purchases. And I believe the total on those, if you'll give me just a second, added up to $48,950,000 allocated to Region 2, which met the equity standards that they had set in place. What I found interesting about the meeting, though, was that this package of projects was dropped on the STAC committee 24 hours before the meeting. And then at the meeting itself, there really wasn't any discussion about what the options were, what was left out. If you know, generally, if you're looking for recommendations, you're letting them know what was considered, what was left out, and the reasoning behind that. There was really none of that, and it was made very clear that CDOT was moving forward with this package to the Traffic Commission within a week. And it really didn't matter what STAC said about it, that they were going to move with or without their recommendations. But then they did not give the information to really be able to, it would literally be as if PPACG staff came to us with a package for our road plan, for the road plan that we forwarded on to STAC, and just said, these are your options without including the other options, and this is it. This is your package. You can either approve or not approve. I found that to be quite frustrating, and actually kind of calls into question of what the role of STAC actually is, because there really wasn't much advisement going on. It was just they were advising us what they were going to do, and that was pretty much the meeting. And that there was a lot of consternation from members around the state about not only the short notice of the package being dropped on them within 24 hours, when the bylaws specifically state that all that has to get to them 7 days prior. But then just additionally is what was left out, what was the reasoning between project A over project B. They were moving 5-10-year projects into the 1 to 5 year time frame and vice versa without really any explanation, any discussion. So not being the regular attendee at STAC, I found that to be a little troubling, to be honest. But ultimately they passed the recommendation through, because that was really the only option that they have, was either to that or not approve. And it was very obvious that even if we recommended to not approve, that they'd be taking it up and passing it anyway. So, my understanding was STAC had a very powerful and important role in this process that appears to, in this case, to have been just completely disrespected and steamrolled, despite what that role is supposed to be. And Holly, I can visit with you offline about, if you weren't watching the meeting, I can visit with you offline about that. But there were 2 items on the agenda there that did not get discussed. So they called a special meeting for today, which was rulemaking for greenhouse gases and I can't remember the second one, but anyway, they're going to hold an hour-long special meeting virtual today to finish up the agenda items that they did not get to on Friday. But that's the stack report.
Yeah,
this
thank
is Dave
you.
Elsner.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You know, as the Central Front Range Vice Chair and stack representative, you know, the characterization that Eric just gave, because he hasn't been to a lot of them, isn't quite accurate. The request was from the Transportation Commission and the Governor's Office to move some projects forward as quickly as possible to get them started. So CDOT didn't have a lot of time to put it together. The other thing to note is that the reason we get into these really short timeframes is as things come up during the month, we have to act on it. Stack used to meet the third Friday of the month, which meant that we wouldn't have even had a chance to look at and discuss what had been requested by the Transportation Commission, because we would have met after the fact. I think, you know, I understand the frustration of people that haven't been around it for a long time, and that's where just about all the frustration came from, was from newer members of stack that really didn't understand that it's a process. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't, but to me, the good news was we at least got to talk about it and voice concerns prior to the Transportation Commission meeting, rather than after the fact of the, why did you do that? And the other thing you have to remember is all of the projects that were approved were on the list. They didn't come up with anything that isn't on the 10-year plan. They had to adjust some of them because, of course, they're looking for shovel-ready projects, and some of them aren't shovel-ready. And then, you know, I've had some work that's supposed to happen in Hartselle. It's been on the 10-year plan, I think, for the last 12 years. It's a small project, but it's something that it's not an important project. Yeah, it needs to be done, but when you have a project that is important that needs a couple more million, I'm more than happy to let people move money away from that one, because there are things that are a lot more important. And, you know, most of that money doesn't go to Park County. So I think you have to understand that stack is an advisory board. We give advice. Are we powerful? Not really. We give advice. They like to listen to us, but you know, we're an unelected advisory board. So, you know, the idea is we just keep working with them and try to keep it friendly. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Elsner. I certainly appreciate the comment. You know, where obviously, and you were there, so you know the consternation of having it dropped on 24 hours before, and I'm fully aware that all the projects came from projects which were sent by this group as well as the other transportation areas and were approved through stack on the 10-year plan. But you know, the way that it was dropped on them, and the lack of what I would just say transparency and how this list came through, and then the attitude of, well, we'd like to have your recommendation, but we're going to take action regardless of what you do today, even though we only gave you 24 hours notice on this, was where my greatest concern was. So thank you very much.
No, I appreciate all those comments, and maybe we can ask, knowing that this wasn't the first time this happened, and probably won't be the last time, if there's a way to just ask the people that run the stack to see if there's a way they can get this information out a little bit earlier. In this particular case, as Mr. Elsner stated, I guess it was the governor that directed CDOT to do it, and then they were jumping through hoops as well. But I think it's still important that we ask these folks to give us as much time as they possibly can, so that we can have a conversation about it. I think there were a couple other hands raised. Just a second. Commissioner Williams, did you have your hand raised, or did I just miss something there?
I could just say thanks to Commissioner Stone and Commissioner Elsner for attending the meeting. When we were on the bylaws committee, we tried many different options of how to make sure that this would work. And couldn't come up with anything at the end of the day as to how to avoid these last minute items, because they really are last minute, and CDOT staff is kind of more preparing for the Transportation Advisory Committee. And so sometimes they're very rushed through, and it does get frustrating when it happens. Just as 2 updates, it is it's on I-25 at County Line Road. The exits on the east side of the road will be closed for a full 6 weeks, but there are details on how to get around them. So the exit and the on-ramp is closed, so you have to get off at separate exits. And then thank you to CDOT for our groundbreaking of Research and Powers.
Yep, that was a great event. Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
I think the frustration was the time frame. I was on the meeting also. And the point was brought up that this is the second time, I think this year or within a year, that we've received documentation with less than 24 hours to look at it. Personally, I didn't even catch it until that morning because of the short notice, right? And you've got so many popping in for changes and this and that. So the sooner they can get to us, the better. And I think that's what some people are frustrated with. I think my frustration with the stack meetings in general is, I think it is time has come to review how those meetings are done. We cannot afford to spend an hour and a half sitting around with people just going around the table telling what is going on in their region. That's just my opinion. I'm one person. But we had to skip very critical agenda items, one of which was the entire reason I had set time aside, the GHG. And it was very frustrating for that item to be put off to today or even another meeting. And I think the time has come where maybe people submit in writing an email on what's going on in their area rather than spending an hour to an hour and a half constantly every month going around the table. While it is very interesting to know whatever is going on in everybody's areas, I am more than happy with just a short paragraph from them to review before the meeting. And then if there's any questions on what it is, you can contact the individual entity rather than take up the time in the meeting. I think we seriously need to review it, how these meetings are done. That if we're going to be taken seriously as a board to review and have time to express our opinions on these different things, we need to have the time to do that. And so maybe that's something Commissioner Hawley or Commissioner Stone, maybe Commissioner Elsner can bring up in the meetings and say, you know, I think it's just time to relook at how we're doing this.
I think that's a great suggestion. And really, I mean, the power and the point of the meeting, even if it is just advisory, is so that CDOT can get input just in case they might have a great plan, but there's something in the plan that needs to be addressed because it might cause a problem in that local area. That's really why you hold those meetings, is to make sure that something isn't inadvertently done that harms some other activity or what have you. So I think that's a great point. And maybe our representatives at the stack could take that forward to the stack leadership and see if they can maybe make some modifications to the meeting. So thank you. Any other comments on the stack? One last thing for me is Sharon, it sounds like you will be at the GHG meeting. Will there be others attending that as well?
I will not be at the GHG. I am having my daughter's wedding reception this afternoon. So that is way more important. Sorry, John, you're going to be there, right?
Do we have someone from the board that can be at that?
I'm going to be there. This is Dick Elsner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think people probably understand my feeling about the whole greenhouse gas thing.
Yes, we do. And if Commissioner Elsner can be there, and then if John Leosados is available, I'm going to try and be on for the first 15, 20 minutes, but then I have a Pikes Peak RTA meeting at 12:30.
I just think it's important that we have representation from this board there, and I appreciate that Commissioner Elsner will be there for us. Is there anybody else that can also attend? John, you will be there. Dick will be there. Anybody else? Okay, so they will be our reps at that meeting. So thank you. All right. Anything else on stack? All right, let's move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just two items briefly and sort of continuing on the greenhouse gas emissions discussion. This came about as a result of a number of conversations, I think, between Commissioner Williams, Councilmember Thompson, John, and sort of we have a breakfast morning get together Wednesday a month where we talk about different transportation issues that are happening across the state and across the region. But the thought was that since we can't really dive very deeply during board meetings into some of these issues, like the greenhouse gas emissions rulemaking efforts, SB 260, as we talked about earlier with the presentation by Jeff Sudemeyer, we set up two separate work sessions where we are going to have some additional time to get into these issues in much more detail. So we have two dates and we'll send out the agendas. I think we already sent out the save the date meeting invites, but it's going to be the morning of Monday, August 2nd and the morning of Monday, August 16th, when we're going to get into those issues. Senate Bill 260, the two rulemaking efforts around greenhouse gas emissions, the one we talked about today with the employer trip reduction, and the one that hasn't started yet, but we think is coming soon, which is a regional reduction in vehicle miles of travel / emissions as well, that we have some concerns about. I think that's the topic of the noon meeting today. So we're going to get into those issues in much more detail, transportation electrification opportunities that may be out there through the different funding opportunities, and a front range passenger rail discussion as well. So we set aside those two mornings that have normally been reserved for our legislative committee meetings, and we thought this would give us a really good chance to get into those issues just in much more detail. We're also going to talk about federal transportation and infrastructure issues as well, and focusing on transportation, but there might be some other needs we have in the region too, as far as infrastructure that the board may want to get behind too, as far as setting some of our priorities. So we'll send out the lineup of when those topics are going to be addressed on those two different meeting dates on August 2nd and August 16th. The other item real briefly is, as Jessica mentioned earlier, we are starting our outreach meetings once again to our local jurisdictions and just checking in to let folks know, remind them about PPACG, what we're up to right now, what our priorities are, but also want to hear back from our local jurisdictions. We'll be in Woodland Park tomorrow night meeting with their city council. Next week, I think we're set with Manitou Springs and Palmer Lake. I think we have a date with Teller County in August, and then the rest will be set up here in the coming weeks and months. But looking forward to checking in to find out what your priorities are as well. And that's all I've got.
Very good. Any questions for Andy? All right, hearing none. We've got member entity announcements. Does anybody have any announcements that they would like to present at this point in time? Wow. I'll just, I have a couple myself. First of all, as of 12 July, Brett Waters is the El Paso County Administrator. So congratulations to him. Many of you know him, but if you have not had an opportunity to get to know him, we can arrange a meeting or a coffee for you so that you can get to know him. As you all know, he came from the city of Colorado Springs, the Deputy Chief of Staff over there. At the NACO trip, which was earlier this week, we've El Paso County, working in concert with the Chamber and the City of Colorado Springs, is working on talking to members of the staffs for the different members, the elected officials for both the House and the Senate, about Space Command retention. And there's another initiative that I'm trying to pursue to get sufficient funding for the Pikes Peak National Forest so that they can actually continue to work vigorously on their 100,000 acre fire risk reduction mitigation project that is almost not funded right now. Out of the 100,000 acres, they've only done 3,000 acres, and they need a lot of money to finish that up. And that's just an important thing for everybody in our community here, both Teller County and El Paso County in particular. And then next week I will be in DC again at the Association of Defense Communities National Convention, which will be early next week. And that is another venue for us to work on Space Command retention. So that's my announcements. Any other announcements? Yes, Mr. Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for those who are traveling up Highway 24, up in Divide, you'll notice on the left, there's a big, beautiful new building that looks a lot like a very nice Hampton Inn. That actually is our new Sheriff's Annex in Teller County. It's a long needed 25-year project to to open a new sheriff's office there in Teller County. It's going to serve the citizens for the next 50 years. We're really excited about that. So feel free to stop in and say hello and check it out if you have any interest. Also did want to let people know that the Veterans Rally will ride again this year in Teller County. It's August 28th. It will center out of Woodland Park this year instead of out of Cripple Creek. But I'm sure you can find information online about how to register for the rally and attend. Expecting over thousands of bikers again in this continued restoration of normalcy. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other announcements? Restoration of normalcy. Those are great words. All right. So many of you may know at the tail end of the packet is a list of PPACG meetings, big list. So please review that. Make sure that your public agency is represented at those meetings. But just a quick reminder, and you can correct me if I've got this wrong, Andy, but our next PPACG meeting, 9 o'clock on the 11th of August. Is that correct? All right, very good. Yes, Councilmember Avila.
Thank you, Chair. So we're celebrating our sesquicentennial, and so July 31st, Colorado Springs will be 150 years old. So that day will start at 10 a.m. with parades and all kinds of activities throughout the day. So I'd like to invite all of you to attend the sesquicentennial celebration. Also at the Pioneers Museum, there's a 150 view of what's going on. Really, I just did a tour of that, and it was quite amazing. You know, they have actual objects there that represent what was going on in the time period. And it's really cool because you can stand under in a spot and something will read to you what that meant or what that person did. And so it's really exciting. I hope that all of you can make it to the museum to do that 150. Right now at C21, they have now and then like pictures of things that happened from 1871 to present day, what that looks like. It's pretty amazing. And also on the Saturday at Sierra High School, we're having the Cinco de Mayo celebration. It's called a Cinco. They're a group that does scholarships for Latinos throughout the county. So El Paso County, that is. And they have a car show and all kinds of music, food, and festivities. So I'll be speaking at that at 12, I don't know, I guess PM. And I believe Lonquinos is going to be there. And so invite you all to attend. And it's going to be a pretty fun 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you for those announcements. And in particular, the 150th, the sesquicentennial for the city, because our next PPACG meeting, we will be past that date for the celebration. So it's great to make the announcement for that today. And just maybe one last quick reminder, the El Paso County Fair is still ongoing, several more days this week. Please take advantage and go out there and enjoy the time out there at the El Paso County Fair. Any last comments?
Yolanda, do you know how long the exhibits are at the library or the museum?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think it'll go on through the month and the end of the month. And so it's on the second and first floors. It's super cool. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly when, but it'll be at the Pioneers Museum, the exhibit, for a good while throughout the summer. And if you have a chance, you can look at the Conejos Neighborhood Museum, where the Black and Latino community that existed in some fabulous things. And you'll see a picture of me and my family and stuff. So you might check it out. I just want to say about the Conejos thing at the Pioneers Museum, that had, when they opened it, that had the hugest attendance that ever existed at the Pioneer Museum to see an exhibit. And that was 1,500 people that walked through the Pioneer Museum.
That's awesome. Yep, the city's getting bigger and bigger events as well. Okay, any last comments? All right, hearing none, thank you, everybody. This adjourns this Board of Directors meeting for the PPACG on July 14. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your participation in this meeting.
Bye.
All right.